Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Feminine Frequency. Today, my guest is Emmi Fortin. She is a breakup and relationship coach. I'm so excited to have you here, Emmi.
Thank you so much. I know we're going to have a great conversation today.
Yes, me too. This is a very, relatable topic, a very applicable topic. I think everyone has, experienced a breakup in their lives. And I love I don't know if you'd call it a tagline or whatever you would call it, but your little phrase there of wake up from the breakup.
Yeah,
Right? And so a big focus of your work, right, is to help women who have experienced a rough breakup and really help them come out of that feeling and out of that dark time of their life and find their footing again and really kind of wake up out of it, right?
absolutely. Yeah, I would love to expand on that a little bit because
Yes,
it
yeah.
was it was a huge part of my story and how I got started in this work.
Yeah.
And I just really kind of want to help other people do the same, which is to wake up in the form of more of like a personal awakening. So I I
Mhm.
always kind of thought of this, relationship that I was in. I did have this moment. It was a tumultuous relationship for me. It was on and off, on and off, on and off, very stressful. It was situationship. So it was like very undefined, unclear. I never really knew like what was going on. And so I felt very like emotionally unsafe in the relationship. And so there was just one moment where I was like laying on the floor crying yet again. And I just like
Mm.
stopped and got really clear. And I was like, what are you doing? And it was like all the stress and crying and suffering that like I had been going through up until that point. It was like the universe came and just kind of like smacked me across the face. You know that like feeling you have when you're just like stunned and you're like, what? That's kind of like how I felt what happened. It was like, I was like heaving, crying, and then all of a sudden I was like, what? What happened? And it was just so clear.
Wow.
It's like you are the one who is going to pull yourself out of this. Like no one is going to come along and save you. You are the one who is going to change yourself, change your life, and get
Yeah.
yourself where you want to be. Like I was not going, nothing was going to change, if I just continued to like lay on the floor crying. And so that's why I
Yeah.
call it wake up from your breakup. It's kind of like you're being stunned, through hardship into this opportunity to change yourself and your entire life into something that you're looking forward to. That's an opportunity that can really put
Mhm.
you on a path that you might not have even ever imagined could be better.
One of those spiritual two by fours, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I love that reframe of instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You can ask maybe instead, like, who is this helping me become, right?
Exactly.
Who is
Yeah.
this helping me become? And maybe you don't know that right in that moment, but it's just switching the framework of how you're looking at your situation to open the door to a little bit of light of maybe this could be actually for my benefit in a way. Maybe this could be, like you said, an opportunity rather than the end, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know for me, like in my relationship experiences in the past, and particularly in that one, I had always let, the man kind of take the lead, or whoever my partner was, just like kind of take the lead of like setting the tone for the relationship. Well, actually, I guess I can't say that for all of my relationships, but particularly that one. And I would always just be like waiting for, what was going to happen with us based on what he kind of decided, or, like the behavior
Wow.
that's happening. And so that kind of wake up was also the moment where I got to decide that like, hey, I actually have a lot more say in the outcome of my experience than I thought I did. And so that was like a really important shift as well. Is ultimately I did choose to end that relationship. And so that was my opportunity to to contribute to, my role in what had been happening and how I had been progressing or not progressing.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting kind of theme to talk about is like how can you be the leader in your relationship, right? We think of leadership as more associated with professional environments, perhaps, or political spheres, right? Or in the community, you can be a leader, but we can also be a leader in our relationships too.
Yeah,
And
and
maybe
I think it's a sorry.
no, and maybe we are leaders whether we know it or not, right? Maybe whether
Or we
we're
might not want
embodying that or
to.
not. Right,
We might
right.
not want to, but realize that when we don't, like, take co-leadership and just let the other person always lead, like it might not be leading us in a direction that we actually want to go to. So it's really more about, I think, being intentional about being a co-leader of creating the relationship. There was
Mhm.
this song that I used to love. I used to be very into country when I was like in my 20s, and there was this song, I forget what it's called or who sings it, but it was all about the woman who was singing it wanting to be in the passenger seat. And she was looking over at, her partner who was driving, and she's just like, it feels so good to be in the passenger seat. And I always really loved that song because that's how I wanted to be too. Like I just wanted to just
Yeah.
follow my partner, like wherever he wanted to go and like be, supportive. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you are also like tending to where you would like yourself to go and the relationship to go.
Right.
And so I was taking a lot more of a back seat in that case.
Mm. Yeah, and I feel like, that's sort of how we are conditioned as girls and women, or at least, as women who are adults now. I think this is changing a little bit for the little girls now, which is good, but I feel like, we heard stories about the man in shining armor coming in and sweeping the damsel off her feet and they're riding off into the sunset, right? And we think of like men proposing to women to get married. So they're the ones in charge of taking that relationship to the next level, right? So there's sort of this expectation from the stories that we hear and what we see in our society that the man does take the lead.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's like fine to have like leadership qualities as long as you're not putting your needs,
Mhm.
desires, dreams like on the back burner for that, right? Because I mean, I can definitely speak to the fact that, as someone who I really value my own feminine energy and I do love like being in flow and having, that leadership quality in my partner, but not to the detriment of what I've learned is like not to the detriment of, my own leadership abilities as well. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's really, really important to co-create.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Yeah, there's so much that we could talk about there because I feel like, you can be in your feminine energy and also be a leader. It's just that we might not lead in the same way. It's more of a, showing up in your desire and allowing your desire to lead the man to where he wants to go, like, or how he can please you as a woman. Um, because I think men do like to please women, but we sometimes are hard to please
For
because we
sure.
don't know what we want, or or we're confused about how to communicate what we want, perhaps. But or we think that we're not supposed to express what we want because for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Good girl programming or what have you. But
Yeah. There's something else you said too that made me think about, oh, how like the man always proposes or, in our society, like what's acceptable. Um, it made me because I spent so much time in that relationship, wondering and repeating the narrative of like, why isn't he choosing me? It was all about like being chosen. And I've noticed that that has been a theme in my life with relationships and men and a lot in the past is like, you know, I want to be picked. I want to be like the special one to be chosen, right? But then I thought about it one day, and it seems so obvious, but it was kind of like another smack in the face. I was a high school biology teacher for 16 years, and I was watching like a documentary, like a nature documentary one day, and I was like, wait a minute. I'm like, pretty much all other animals, like the female selects the male as her mate. And I was like, what am I doing? Like and I don't, when I say like the females have the power, I don't mean it in like a feminist way. I mean it in like biologically speaking, we're
Yeah,
actually wired and designed to choose the most eligible, best mate for us, for rearing offspring and even if your choice is not to have kids, like, I have chosen not to, I'm still biologically wired to choose the best mate that will be supportive for me. So I really
right.
feel like that was an interesting reframe that I also needed
I
to
love that.
to end that relationship and, choose something different for myself.
That is so funny. That is so funny. I love how, we can get these messages from different, places in the universe, songs or biology class, like,
Yeah.
and you're like,
I
oh,
literally think I was
that
watching like frogs, and I was like, wait a minute.
awesome. So, take us back to like when you got that sort of hit that, or that awakening, if you will, when you were crying on the floor. How long did it take you from that realization to decide to choose to end your relationship that you were in?
Yeah, I love that you're asking that because it wasn't like this moment where all of a sudden like everything in my life changed and it was like a 180. It really was a process that I had to take myself through. But there was a clear decision that I made. And I actually knew because this was like such a cycle for me to go back to this person over and over again. Like I kind of knew in myself that even if I was like, okay, this is it. I'm not going back. Like I knew I wasn't actually at that point yet. But what I did know was that I was at the point where I was now ready to embrace my own self-discovery and heal
Mm.
myself where I needed to heal, and also kind of really build a stronger foundation within my own self. So that I could work my way up to finally being able to make that final decision. So for me, it was a process. And then I did a lot of learning, healing modalities, saw a lot of different unique professionals to help me with that, started practices like yoga and meditating and, took some solo travel trips. So, I mean, it was like
Mhm.
years of exploration through that. Um, but yeah, it did start with that one decision to just kind of start showing up for myself in a different way.
Yeah, it started with the awareness, right? It started with, oh, this is all up to me.
Yes, exactly.
And that set you up on that path, right, of healing and really, it sounds like really embodying your own personal power in a way that was new.
Yeah, yeah. And like I said, it was incremental. Every time I did something new for myself that was supportive, it supported me in a different and a unique way. Um, and I think it was important to explore all those different aspects, so that you can learn what really does help you, what really does help support what you need in the moment. And what I needed in the beginning, of my journey was different from what I need now as a woman. Like some of those practices are the same and I've continued, but it's just
Mm.
interesting. Like if you can pay attention to, what is coming into your life in that moment, what you're drawn to and what you're not drawn to. Like you might be drawn to something later in your journey that you weren't in the beginning and vice versa.
Right. Can you give an example of that?
Yeah, I can. So I had heard about this practice called Qigong a long time ago,
Mm.
but I wasn't really like very interested in it. I was like, oh, okay, like that's just like a movement practice that you can do, but I had like no desire to do it. But fast forward years later, like more current to now, I've had the opportunity to do like self-awareness, breathing, and movement practices for years now. So now, like I took a Qigong class maybe a month ago because it seemed interesting to me. Because now that I'm more in tune with my body and my just my own like inner self and spirituality, like it now made sense to do this like slow movement of energy throughout my body. Whereas like in the beginning of the journey, my energy was erratic and all over the place and like very external, like it was outside of myself. So it was just interesting to see, what I've gravitated toward throughout the different steps of healing.
It's like that. It reminds me of that saying, the teacher will arrive when the student is ready, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So looking back on that relationship now, like how do you feel about it now? Do you see it as, you know, like positive, negative, or are you kind of neutral? Or what would you say about that?
Yeah, it was definitely, I mean, I think about this often. It was the relationship I needed to have to go inward.
Mm,
It was the struggle, the challenge that I needed to have, like I said, to smack me across the face and wake me up. A lot of really, really meaningful, impactful things came out of that relationship, which was way deeper knowledge of myself and kind of individuation from my family. And also my ability to just kind of become more curious about myself and life in a way that was different from how I had my whole life previously. Um,
yeah.
it tested my own personal independence and strength in ways that, I might not have ever experienced. And there's just been so much transformation that came out of it. I mean, including me changing my career as from a teacher into, being a coach that helps people heal and rebuild, after a breakup, divorce, or just even a relationship in the past that you haven't been able to let go of or fully move on from. Um,
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
relationship, I mean, I don't think I would have. My plan was to stay a teacher for, my full 30 years, get the retirement pension, do that. I don't think I ever would have thought of
Wow.
changing my careers if this hadn't happened.
Wow. And so how long did that take from that evolution in that pivot in your career, like from the relationship ending? Were you kind of like, this is it, I'm doing this for a living, or was that another process?
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely another process, but I think it was a result of doing so much inner work and self-discovery because of that relationship that then, and I tell my students this all the time. It's like your your relationship with yourself, with other people, and with your work are deeply interconnected in like this triangle. And if you're having, issues or maybe even success in one area, it is going to ripple into the others. And so, because I was having so much disruption in my own inner self and in my relationship, then it rippled into my work. And I was like, I've really enjoyed being a teacher all this time, but I'm feeling this new calling to help people in a different way based on what my experience has been. I'm like, I know what it feels like. I know what I had to do. I've learned so many different modalities that can help other people with this as well. I just felt the pull to really want to transition into kind of just still teaching, but just in a different way.
Yes, yes. I love that idea of the triangle. It's just a nice simple way to look at it, but so true. Like we sometimes try to compartmentalize, right, these different facets of our life, but it's almost like you could also say like a stool with three legs, like if one
Yeah.
is missing or compromised, the stool's going to fall down, right? So it all,
I actually have an image of that of a stool on my Instagram somewhere, and it was exactly that. It's like you need all three legs, and one without the other, is you're going to see an impact in the other areas. I refer to it as like my L3 philosophy, which is like you need to L3, love yourself, love your relationships, love your life to be like fully thriving. Of course you
Mm.
can have success in one area, but you really need like to incorporate all three.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think if you don't have the self-love piece, right? If you're not tending to yourself, not just with, like, of course, eating healthy and exercising, and we also think about self-care as like getting manicures and pedicures and things like that. But I think self-care goes a lot deeper than that. It's about really having a life that you love and trusting that you deserve to have a life that you love and all those kinds of things. Following your heart and your passions and being fulfilled, deeply fulfilled in your life. Um, and I think that without that, it's almost impossible to have a healthy, thriving relationship with another
Mm.
person. Do you agree
Yeah,
with that?
I agree. I mean, my relationship with myself um before doing all this work, and I continue to. I think also I guess you could call a mistake that people make, and I also try to bring awareness with my clients is like, you just because you're struggling with something right now, I'll use an example. Like, let's say you're going through a breakup and all you can focus on is like, the loss of this partner in your life, right? Maybe you're thinking about that person or how you wanted things to be or whatever. A lot of people will say like, I just wish I could stop these repetitive thoughts, like I just want to forget about everything. And I know I've definitely said that. I'm like, I wish I could just like zap my brain and just like forget all of it because it was like it can be so hard to move through emotionally. um but what I try to remind people is like this is now a part of your life, whether you like it or not. It's a part of your life. It's something you've experienced. It's a person that you are involved with, maybe even deeply intertwined with. And just like I say, like let's say you, heaven forbid, like you have a child and you lose your child or you lose a loved one, a father, a mother, a brother, sister. Like you're not just going to forget about them. They're a
Mhm.
part of your life, but
Yeah,
what you
yeah.
what you do is you need to learn how to manage and reframe when emotions or thoughts come up because they will, right? Like we all know we've been out somewhere and we hear a song and boom, it brings us right back to a memory or a moment. And that's going to happen in life. So we can't just forget about, these people, these experiences. We have to come up with coping mechanisms and skills, tools for how to manage them when they do come up. And that's one thing
Mm.
that I help people with.
Okay.
So like triggers, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I love that. I love that. Instead of just trying to suppress the memory or pretend that it never happened, like reframing it and bringing in different ways to deal with that experience and that story really of what they went through. Maybe in a more like empowering light or um yeah, just making it easier to deal with and manage those emotions.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. It's like, maybe you have you hear a song and you immediately you're brought back to a memory where you were feeling really great with this person. Maybe you were in love, maybe you were smiling, and then a
Hmm.
reaction that could happen is maybe you'll get angry or disappointed or resentful that you don't have that anymore, right? Or
Mm.
you're like, "Ah, that was so good. I'm never going to have that again." Or,
Mm.
whatever your thought might be around that, like, okay, this is exactly where the work needs to be done. Maybe you have that memory and maybe we can reframe it to one of appreciation or gratitude and be like, you know what? That was a really wonderful moment. And it was a moment in time where I was really happy and I was really in love. And I'm just going to appreciate it for what it was and
Yeah,
move on.
yeah.
Like we have a choice about how we can think about it. I'm not saying it's easy to do. You just have to like if you're repeating that practice over and over and over, you're kind of like training your brain to always reframe things in a way that feels supportive rather than in a way that's going to draw you back, pull you back into the past and keep you stuck there.
Hmm. Yeah. Do your clients ever um come to you with like feelings of shame or guilt about their breakups? Because I've noticed a lot of women do sort of internalize shame about, what they see as mistakes or failures that they've made, and a failed, quote unquote, right, failed relationship might hit a woman especially hard if she kind of feels that she did something wrong or chose the wrong partner or wasted time with somebody that wasn't good for her. So I'm just wondering if that tends to come up at all.
Yeah, it's actually comes up for both women and men. I've had numerous people, and I have felt it myself as well. It's exactly what you just mentioned about like self-acceptance and self-forgiveness. People feel really kind of shameful or bad that they allowed themselves to stay with a person or in a relationship for way longer than, they knew was good for them or than they quote unquote should have. And it's almost like, shame for self-betrayal. Um,
Yeah.
and so that's definitely something that we work through so that you can get to self-forgiveness, which honestly, like sometimes people have an easier time forgiving the other person for
Yeah,
like horrible behaviors than forgiving themselves for that self-abandonment, self-betrayal.
absolutely. That's a tough one, but it's like as long as you're shaming or judging yourself, you don't really have access to pure self-love, right? I mean, true self-love is unconditional. And so as long as we're judging ourselves, beating ourselves up, it's like we can't really get to that self-love. So, if we can let that go, if we can forgive ourselves, then we can experience self-compassion, self-acceptance, right? Like even if there are things we could have done differently or parts of ourselves that are messy or whatever,
Mhm.
awkward. Um, if we can love all of that, you know, then we're in good shape for having a really healthy relationship too, not only with ourselves, but with others.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about is a perfect example of self-care. Like, yes, there's
Mhm.
physical things you can do, but like a really important self-care practice is just really asking yourself, like when you're having those thoughts, right, about that aren't supportive toward yourself, that's not being, like you said, self-compassionate. So, how can I be more caring toward myself around this situation, right? It's like I always remind people as well, it's like whoever you are at this moment in time, whether it's you, whether it's your ex or your current partner, you're both doing the best you can with the tools and experiences you've had up to this point. Now, I'm not saying the best looks good, right?
Mhm.
But it's the best that you're doing with what you currently have. And so if you're looking back on some of your choices and you feel shameful or regretful about them, you can kind of, look at it as though like that is where you were in that moment and that was the best you could do in that moment. You have, you've now made progress, you're always evolving, and maybe your choices will be different moving forward. But that was the best you could do in that moment. Same thing for the other person. So it's not that we're excusing poor behaviors, but we're trying to
Yeah.
create some understanding and some acceptance around, listen, this is what happened. Okay, now this is what we can do differently in the present.
Hmm. Hmm. I know there's a lot of talk right now, like in social media and, in the realm of relationships about narcissism and narcissistic behavior disorder and things like that. Do you find yourself dealing with that, or is that something that comes up?
I would say a lot of people come and they say, "Oh, well, I was with a narcissist." So, and they kind of just like expect that to be the end all be all of like, like the explanation for what happened.
They were
But
with a narcissist? They were with
yeah,
one?
like I have a
Okay.
lot of
Yeah.
people who are like they kind of come, and people may be
Mhm.
mad, with me saying this, but I want to, because I don't want to discredit, like, yes, there are definitely people who have, behaviors that would be in alignment with how a narcissist might act. Like an actual diagnosed narcissist is actually a pretty low percentage as far as like the actual disorder. So I like to always remind people that, well, there's a lot of people that have behaviors that might be similar. Um, and
Mhm.
at the same time, part of the course that I have is like being able to accept our own role in a dynamic. So if you have found yourself in a relationship with a quote unquote narcissist, and especially if that has happened more than once or a few times, well, then you are playing a role that is contributing to this dynamic. And so there must be some way that, you can dive a little deeper into yourself, do some self-discovery. Like maybe you'll find that, oh my gosh, I never realized that I have like people-pleasing tendencies, or that um, what do they call that when you're like supporting somebody's poor behavior? Enabling, right? Maybe I'm an
Yes.
enabler. I find that with a
Right.
lot of people who have been in like a dynamic where there's like substance abuse, for example. It's like, they'll tell me that their partner was an alcoholic, but then as we dig a little deeper, they'll share, oh, well, yeah, I had another boyfriend who, used this substance. Or, and then, well, my mom drank a lot. Like you see these patterns coming up. And so it's our responsibility. I'm not saying that like everything is, your fault as an individual. It's a dynamic, but what we
Mhm.
do is we need to bring awareness to our own coping strategies, like emotional responses to um, our own behavioral patterns as well.
Yeah, no, I love that philosophy of taking sort of radical responsibility in a way for our own patterns, behaviors, and ultimately reality, because the choices that we make then end up creating the reality that we live in, right? So, um, and that's ultimately all we can control, right? So, just bringing people back into that and ourselves always back into that locus of control within us. Like, how am I creating this dynamic, especially if it's happening over and over and over? Um, it's more empowering than feeling, oh, I'm a victim of this person's behavior and there's nothing I can do. I'm just, a pawn in their game. It's like, no, you're actually the main character in this beautiful legend of your life, right? So I think that's
Yes.
a much more empowering perspective.
Yes, and to that point, that is exactly how I felt. I actually used to use those same exact words, of like, oh, like he's playing games with me, or just these like he was the villain always in my narrative, right? Like before I
Yeah.
wrote I wrote a memoir called Who is Your Red Dress? One Woman's Quest to Break Up with a Love Addiction. And
Mhm.
until I had written my memoir, I always viewed him as the villain. Okay, I was the victim for sure. Like, why is he
Yeah.
treating me this way? Blah, blah, blah. Like, would tell everyone who would listen. And
Yeah.
when I wrote the memoir, I was writing in the third person. So I was viewing myself as a character, he was a character, everyone else obviously a character. And so when I started to be able to kind of see the interactions of those characters, I could understand a little bit more clearly, like what I was like the actions that Emmy was taking, actions that he was taking. And it helped me really to accept what my role had been, which I only later learned and was actually like horrified to find out. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like, I have codependent behaviors. What? Like my mind was
Mm.
blown. It's crazy like how unaware we can be, if we haven't like done the exploration to learn more about ourselves and even just like relationship dynamics. When
Yeah.
I learned about attachment styles, it was like blowing my mind because like it
Hmm.
was explaining so much of how I was behaving, and it helped to take me out of the victim role and understand like I was contributing to that toxic cycle just as
Yeah.
much as he was because like, I had a lot of like wounded feminine energy, which was causing me to be really codependent, like relying on him or other partners to fill parts of me because I was always seeking it outside of myself, rather than feeling
Yeah.
like empowered woman. I was very, very disempowered at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's sort of can you could think that you could think of it as sort of normal to be more codependent when you're younger because, as a child, as children, we're given validation by others, right? We're given validation by our parents, by our teachers, other authorities or relatives, mentors, right? And so we kind of grow up with this idea that others make us worthy with their, with their words, with their love, with their affection, with their attention. And yet, as we individuate into adults, we have to mature and start sourcing that worth and validation inside us. But that's not always like a, black and white process. And sometimes it takes these kinds of relationships, right, to show us that actually it's not up to that person to be the source of my worth, right? It's not up to them to validate me as a human being. That's actually my job now as an adult. So it can take something like that and can feel not so great in the moment, but it can take that kind of experience sometimes to learn that lesson.
For sure. 100%.
Yeah. Oh, well, also I know you have a cheat sheet for people that's available for free. So I'll put
Yeah.
that, you want to talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, because it's always like a crowd pleaser. It's it's interesting, when people get to use it. I find that they really enjoy it. It's this nice kind of, structured four quadrant. I call it a relationship cheat sheet. But it's really used for two reasons. It's a cheat sheet to help you understand what your core values, desires, needs are in a relationship. And then also how you can strengthen those things in yourself so that you can be, this kind of best version of yourself in order to attract a partner who's like in an equal vibe. And then, like the second reason you use it is like, how do I want to create and design my ideal relationship? Like, what would that look like? It's funny because when I have like my initial kind of discovery calls with people, I always ask them, how do you want to feel as consistently as possible in your relationship? And they're like, I don't know. It's a good
Yeah.
question. Because like we tend to focus a lot more on like how we don't want to feel, or, like thinking about our past relationships and what we don't want or what we've struggled with. And so this cheat sheet really helps you focus on creating a vision for yourself. Like if you could be in an ideal relationship, what
Yeah.
would that look like? How would that feel? And how can you start supplementing practices into your life right now to help you feel more like that already without a partner even being present? And so the freebie that I'm offering is a download of that cheat sheet, which also comes with a guide of the three reasons why men and women can't find fulfilling, meaningful relationships and how to overcome them. So it's pretty comprehensive. And you can find that on the homepage of my website.
Amazing. And that sounds like it'd be super valuable even if you are in a relationship right
Oh,
now
yeah.
and you're not in a breakup, but you're just wanting to keep your relationship strong or make it stronger.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Anyone for sure would benefit
yeah,
from it.
and check that out.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Thank you. Thank you so much for that and for sharing your story and your wisdom today. This is such a great topic, and I can tell that you really provide a beautiful space for your clients to, be vulnerable and do this hard but really important work.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you helping me share this, information and how people can learn and grow from their ended relationships. I think I would love to leave people with the idea that potentially something that is the hardest thing you've ever gone through in your life, right, can
Hmm.
be the most pivotal thing for you to be able to just expand every area of your life as well. So, yeah,
Yes.
it's possible, and I've seen it. I've seen it happen, with
Mhm.
with the people I work with. So, I would know we're ending, but I would like to say there's, for example, there's this one woman who's in her 60s. And when we started, she had been coming off of like a 30 plus year relationship marriage, right? And in the beginning, she really didn't see herself as like having much value because she had been a stay-at-home mother, housekeeper, and her husband had this like, successful business, and she just like really didn't see much value, or what she's like, what do I have? What am I going to do? Like, why would someone want to be with me? And she also couldn't see herself like being in a fulfilling relationship. She's like, she couldn't even see what would that even look like. But then through our work together, she was able to build up her own self-worth and just open her eyes to be like, actually, I have so much to offer. I actually have quite a vibrant, fun, curious, creative spirit. I mean, complete 180 in who she was, which then ultimately, and like this is not the goal when we start, but like it just progressed this way. She ended up meeting a man, and she has told me numerous times, she said, I am having the most fun I have ever had in my life in this relationship. It's a relationship I never even dreamed that I could have. I didn't know it could be
Wow.
good. So
Wow.
like it's
That's so
later in
cool.
life, like it's
Yeah. That's so
anyone can do
beautiful.
it if you're willing to show up and be like really honest and open with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to say, after the breakdown comes the breakthrough,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So thank you for sharing that story. That's really beautiful and inspiring.
Yeah, thank you. It makes me happy to think about her and, the other people who are in similar situations because you can transform yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for watching The Feminine Frequency today, and definitely reach out to Emmy and grab her cheat sheet if this resonated. And we'll see you next time on another episode of The Feminine Frequency.